The topics of plagiarism and intellectual property in regards to art have really been on my mind lately. And who could be a better artist to relate to those topics than Andy Warhol? Also, I need more art for my room, and the color scheme of his iconic Marilyn screen print would look so cute in here. I'm just using some cheapo acrylic paints and a square canvas that I picked up at Joann Fabrics. I found the reference image I wanted to use. I put a grid on it using an app called Drawing Grid, and then I just pulled it up on my laptop as a reference image. I became interested in the art and even more so the worldview and philosophy of Andy Warhol when I was 17 or 18. Twice now I visited the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh, which I highly recommend to anyone who's in the area. It's so fun and interactive, and also there are so many good photo ops in there. Warhol famously said, "In the future, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes." And that kind of spurred the phrase 15 minutes of fame. He actually may have never even said that, but it represents so much of his ethos regardless. And I feel like it kind of came true. So much of his work and philosophy is ever relevant in our current internet media hellscape. Who was Andy Warhol anyway? Andrew Warhol Jr. was born nearly a century ago on August 6th, 1928 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Yins heard that right. His parents were immigrants from Austria-Hungary, and his father worked as a coal miner. His family was Catholic, and religious iconography would influence much of his future art. As a child, Andy developed an autoimmune disorder and spent a lot of time bedbound. He would spend these times drawing, listening to the radio, and surrounding his bed with photographs of Hollywood movie stars. After winning awards for art in high school, Andy went to Carnegie Institute of Technology and studied commercial art, earning a BFA of pictorial art in 1949. He then moved to New York City and started a career drawing illustrations for magazines and advertisements, and then worked as a shoe designer. During this time, he experimented using tracing paper and other methods of tracing art to make multiple copies. In the 1960s, Andy started adopting silk screen printing, and in 1962, his iconic Campbell's soup can was featured in a Times Magazine article. In November of that same year, just months after Marilyn Monroe's tragic death at age 36 due to barbiturate overdose, Warhol had an exhibit that showcased many repetitions of the Hollywood icon's face, which is what I'm knocking off today. The Marilyn screen print I'm plagiarizing today is from 1967, but it used the same promo photo of the actress that Warhol had also used for many previous works. About repetition, Andy said, "The more you look at the same exact thing, the more the meaning goes away, and the better and emptier you feel." That quote makes me think of the modern-day internet media hellscape we live in, and how we all consume a massive number of images every day, yet are so desensitized to them. Anyways, part of the reason Warhol was drawn to screen printing as a medium was because he was a ruthless capitalist, and the medium allowed him to mass produce his art, often using assistants to help him in a factory line style. In fact, his art studio / cool hangout space was called the Factory for this reason. Instead of art being something deeply personal and emotional and handmade, Andy blurred the lines between fine art and mass-produced consumerism. The Factory was also, for lack of a better word, lit AF, and many artists and socialites would party there, including Mick Jagger and the Velvet Underground. Warhol was obsessed with fame, so it was fitting that his studio was also a spot for famous people to congregate. I think that's why Marilyn Monroe was such a perfect subject for Warhol's art. Marilyn's face was one of the most repeated and recognizable images of the time, in a way similar to the repetitive consumerist imagery of the Campbell's soup cans that he also screen printed. Some critics think his art referred to a society in which individuals were seen as mere products rather than human beings. So, why am I making a replica of Warhol's Marilyn screen print? Obviously, I'm doing it to be dramatic and to make a grand artistic statement. Like, duh. But why? Lately, I've been fascinated by the concept of intellectual property and ownership in art. I've read a lot about intellectual property in music, especially with the Blurred Lines and Robin Gaye estate court case, and with Olivia Rodrigo preemptively giving writing credit to Paramore for her song Good For You, even though Paramore weren't involved in the writing of the song. But it's also a topic that's coming up a lot in terms of visual art, such as with the popularity of NFTs, which I'm gonna be honest, I don't know enough about to feel like I can give my full, nuanced, educated opinion on whether they're good or bad. I don't want to dive into the morality of it, but I've seen so many articles about scammers creating NFTs of artist work without asking permission or even letting the artist know. And in 2021, an NFT of a digital sketch of the Campbell's soup can, recovered from one of Andy Warhol's floppy disks, that's a throwback, sold at an auction for a whopping $1.17 million. Apparently the proceeds will benefit the Andy Warhol Museum, and I love that place, but it's weird to think about someone buying the NFT token of ownership of a piece of art when that piece of art itself is just a drawing of packaging that's a trademark of the Campbell's Soup Company. It made me wonder, did Campbell's Soup sue Andy Warhol? And did Marilyn Monroe's estate sue him? So I did some research, and apparently Campbell's Soup was pretty happy about Warhol's appropriation of their soup can, and they saw it as free publicity. They even sent him a letter of admiration and cases of free Campbell's Soup. But even if the company had sued, it seems that Warhol's artistic use of the logo did not infringe upon their trademark because, and I quote, "The public was unlikely to see the painting as sponsored by the soup company or representing a competing product. Paintings and soup cans are not in themselves competing products. However, if Warhol had put the soup can image on t-shirts or greeting cards, he would have had much more of a problem in defending a trademark infringement lawsuit because they aren't traditional artistic media." Additionally, Andy Warhol was never sued for his Marilyn Monroe depictions. He was, however, sued for his silkscreen depictions of Prince. A photographer named Lynn Goldsmith sued the Warhol Foundation when she found out that his silkscreens of Prince for Vanity Fair magazine were based off of unpublished photographs that she herself had taken of the late artist. In 2019, a New York federal court ruled that Warhol's pieces were fair use because they transformed a vulnerable, uncomfortable person in the original photograph into an iconic, larger-than-life figure. However, in 2021, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals overturned that ruling and ruled that Warhol's use of Goldsmith's photographs was, in fact, a copyright violation. Apparently, this decision could have sweeping ramifications for fair use, according to New York University law professor Amy Adler in an interview with ArtNet. She said, "It's a radical decision. It severely constrains and restricts fair use." She also said, "Fair use is a total mess, bottom line. It's so enraging and interesting to try to make sense of." I'm not a lawyer, but I agree with her on that one. It's also fascinating to me that the photographer can win the lawsuit for copyright infringement, but not the subject, such as Prince, that the photograph is of. It reminds me of another recent court case in which a paparazzi, or paparazzo, I guess is the official. Anyway, a paparazzi won a copyright lawsuit against the model Emily Ratajkowski for posting a paparazzi photo that he took of her without her consent, obviously, because it's paparazzi, to her own Instagram. So he won a lawsuit claiming that it was copyright infringement for her to post a picture of herself that he had taken without her consent. And speaking of Rada, she wrote an essay in The Cut that talked about that case, and it also talked about how she felt after an artist named Richard Prince used her Instagram post of herself and sold it in his gallery show. His gallery show was literally just him blowing up people's Instagram posts without their permission and selling it as art. She actually tried to buy back that physical artwork of her own Instagram post, And now she's using Richard Prince's moves against him, and she's selling an image of that artwork that is just an image of a picture on her Instagram. And she's selling it as an NFT, adding yet another layer to this nightmare of a copyright case. Intellectual property rights are like onions. If Marilyn was alive to see Andy Warhol's appropriation of her image, I wonder how she would have reacted. And if they were both alive in today's internet media hellscape, maybe Marilyn would have made an NFT of Andy Warhol's image of her as retaliation. Who knows? With all that being said, R.I.P. Andy Warhol, you probably would have loved NFTs. And speaking of NFTs, I'm proud to announce that you can now buy my rendition of Andy Warhol's rendition of Marilyn Monroe as an NFT for a mere 1.5 million. Just kidding. I'm just gonna hang it up in my bedroom. Unless